Welcome back to Woman, Conversations in Black and White. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Linda. And we have chosen to record to not only have these conversations across racial lines about sensitive topics, but also to record them and share them with our listeners as a way of increasing understanding between races about difficult topics. Today's topic, Bernadette.
Today's topic is white supremacy. And what does it really mean? And what does it really look like?
Excellent. Would you like to start?
Well, to me, what prompted this conversation, and you and I talked about this out on the porch when we caught each other. It was a few weeks ago where the young man in Georgia went to 3 different Asian spas and killed 8 people, 6 of them Asian women. And so I'm seeing all these stop Asian hate, and you hear more Asian people speaking and talking, and you hear about literally the terror and torment that they have been in the last year, maybe 14 months since the coronavirus pandemic started in the world. And we had a sitting president saying Kung flu and China virus and things of that nature. So you have Asian people who are literally being assaulted and some who have been murdered because of this type of racism. And I'm watching, the social media lights up, and I'm watching the # Stop Asian Hate. And I gotta be honest with you, Linda, I was pissed. And the reason why I was pissed is because we keep tiptoeing around what the real issue is. And to me, the real issue is we wouldn't need # Stop Asian Hate. We wouldn't need Black Lives Matter. We wouldn't need Hispanic Heritage Foundation if we address the issue of white supremacy. None of these other organizations would even be needed.
Right.
But in the news media, no one is speaking those words that we've got to do something about white supremacy. So I was hurt for them and for their community, but I was absolutely livid that we are still not calling this what it is.
Right. Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. It's like there's a story that has been told every now and then that here's all these people trying to help, and they're standing by the river, and there's bodies that keep coming down the river. And so they start pulling out the bodies and helping those that they can, but there's a lot of dead bodies, and they just keep pulling them out and pulling them out. And finally someone says, why don't we go upriver and see what's putting the bodies in the river? And I 100% agree with you that it's white supremacy. And in a minute, I'll expand on that too, because I have some thoughts from a lot of the reading I've been doing. But yeah, it's white supremacy. And again, comparing it, it's like when college campuses teach women to protect themselves instead of teaching men to be responsible and don't be a rapist. I mean, like that could be a message. Don't be a rapist, for crying out loud, respect women. But no, it's women. Here's ways to protect yourself from all these potential rapists that are running around the campus. And the conversations about white supremacy far too often are exactly like that. It's like, oh, Black Lives Matter and Stop Asian Hate. And this poor community is getting beat up on. And yeah, it's all true, but why? I mean, who's throwing the bodies in the river? It's white supremacy. And you're right. I mean, sometimes we talk real, but too often it gets tiptoed around, at least in the everyday conversations that people have. It gets tiptoed around.
Yes. And even to me, even in a broader context, because it wasn't many like reputable newscasters who actually called it out for what it was. It's danced around.
Yes.
It's danced around. Yeah.
It's danced around. So
now, why do you think it's danced around? I have my feelings about why I think it's danced around, but why do you think it's danced around?
Because it's too big, and because the people in power, well, and that's where I'll go off on my other topic. So I might want to let you answer this first, or it's related. The people in power are either not wanting to see it, not comfortable see it, or they actually are trying to maintain it. One of the three. And similar to, say, an abusive alcoholic father in a family. You don't talk about that. I mean, that's the thing you don't talk about. You can talk about this or that or the other thing,
Right.
but you can't talk about that because that's the big open secret, and we're not allowed to talk about that.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that people who've had any level of dysfunction in their family can recognize that dynamic, that when the problem is too big, and I mean too big to be processed, and too challenging to the power structure within the family or within the country or within the world, then you can't dare to speak it out loud. You can only do that off in the corners. You can't do it right out front, where somebody would have to deal with it, or else they have to suppress it again. And to me, that's what's going on in Georgia is, like, well, we can't allow this to happen. And so wham, we're going to do everything we can to make it go back in the box and make
Mhm.
everything go back like it was. And that's what I see happening.
Okay. To use that analogy, I think it is some of that, but also I think a large part of it is if you acknowledge it, that means you got two choices. You have to do something different to change it, or you have to say, I accept this. This is okay with me.
Well,
So just like the analogy with the alcoholic, father who's tormenting the family. If mother says this is no longer acceptable, she has to be willing to either A, take a stance, leave, or put him out, or B, look at her children and everyone else in her community and say, this is okay with me.
right.
So when you name
Completely
it,
true.
yeah, when you name it, you have to do something about it. It is one thing or the other. And
Right.
so I think often in like regular everyday things, like regular, you said regular well-meaning white folk, if they have to say that was an act of white supremacy, then in their lives, they would have to think about, what am I going to take a stand against? Or am I going to say that this is okay because I don't want to go through the hassle of
Right.
making a change?
And the more it's thrown up in people's faces, which is what's been happening the last year,
Yes.
then the more people are uncomfortable with that. It's like they are put in that position. Ooh, I do have to do something about this. I have to take a stand. Even if I never say the words, I'm either accepting this openly, or I have to take action. And so, yes, I agree with you completely. You just took my idea and put even more words to it, but it's exactly right. I agree with you. And families are a good analogy, just that we can get a grip on it, because
Yes.
many of us have been in difficult families, and even if you haven't, you may have read about them or been around people who are. And the level of denial is really great. And the level of denial about white supremacy in our country, and probably in many countries, is also great. And the level of denial then puts a blanket on, and oh, we can't talk about that. Then that would mean something has to change. So, so the add-on that I wanted to bring to this table, I'm a longtime organic gardener, a longtime green activist of sorts, less about parades and signs and more about how I live my life. But still, I really understand issues of nature and how that goes together. And I've been diving deeper into that. And I read a book called Braiding Sweetgrass recently by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And I'm also touching into other indigenous, she's an indigenous heritage woman with a botany degree. And she's writing about indigenous traditions of respect for the other beings of the world, the tree people, the rock people, the grass people, and so forth. And to our culture, the white culture, it sounds so quaint, but it's actually a way of life for many, if not most, indigenous cultures, where there is a high level of respect for the natural world and for the wisdom in the natural world. And she made a statement that's very strong. she said in most indigenous traditions, including her own, it is understood that although humans are one group, they are probably the least wise of all the people. The tree people are wiser, and the water people are wiser, and the animal people are wiser. They have more wisdom. Now, humans are clever and they are creative and they are ambitious, but they aren't necessarily wise. And I've thought a lot about that this week. Then I bounced off to read a Latino writer about the shadow of the green man, and he uses the word colonialization. So where we're using white supremacy, another word that is very similar is colonialization. It's where, and then I came to the word anthropocentrism. It's very hard to pronounce for me. I want to put an extra R in. Anthropocentrism, which means humans believe we are under anthropocentrism. Humans believe we are at the pinnacle of the created world, and everything is less important than humans. Everything is less important than humans. And it doesn't matter what you do to the earth because we are the top dog. Now think how easily that anthropocentrism translates to, okay, now among the humans, whites are the top of the heap and everybody else is below us. And white men especially are at the top of the heap and everybody else is below us. Now, if you support us and submit to us, then we like you and you can be part of our world. But if not, we have to keep you down. And that's colonialization, but it's been used for among the colonial countries, which we could list, I'm sure.
Yes.
The colonizing countries, that attitude, humans are at the top of the heap. We are more important. We are the center of the universe. It has been used for literally centuries to keep other people down. And more, instead of just people that were poor, it was not only the natural world, everything exists to benefit humans, and that's all it exists for. And then people of color exist to benefit humans. So it's a very deeply embedded, but not, I mean, there have been cultures who escaped that. They lived indigenously. They lived close to the land with respect. So it's not the only way to live on planet Earth, but it is a predominant one and a dominant one that I've really been thinking a lot about lately, because it's the same attitude. I'm more important than you, and therefore I don't care what happens to you. And if you look at what Governor Kemp of Georgia signed in, that's pretty much what he was saying. I don't care about you. And I don't care. I don't care that the vote be legal. All I care is that we stay at the top of the heap.
Yes.
That's my little soapbox. So.
Well, we all have a soapbox moment, a time or two. Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, not only on a local perspective, but also on a longitudinal perspective, like over the evolution of mankind and globally as well. That this is, I don't know. I don't know where white people got that notion, specifically white men, but boy, they brought it hook, line, and sinker and have held on to it with teeth and grit and might ever since.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I'm guessing that, well, I don't know about other people, but I know that even within my ordinary everyday interactions, even with my beloved husband, I have moments of that where he will treat me momentarily in just a flash like a second-class citizen. And, he doesn't get away with it anymore. And usually if we let things cool down just a bit, he understands that and he apologizes and doesn't mean to do that, but it's just embedded. It's unconscious.
Yes.
And that's what's happening in our whole culture. There are people that mean to do it, and there are other people that don't mean to do it, that just simply haven't understood and broken all the habits. There's a lot there. So it's like we have to get our hearts opened and tenderized towards the other beings in the world that aren't just me. That's all.
Yeah.
It's a more
And then
expansive way.
yeah. And then you have to be willing to do the work.
Right.
Because to become consciously aware is one thing, but once you become consciously aware, to continue to make a different choice every single time,
Right.
that takes an amount of effort and energy. So you have to be willing to do that work and recognize that consequences come with that. That was like you were sharing about the story about the O-ring, and he was willing to accept the consequences of
Oh,
being
yes.
truthful. Mhm.
This is a story about
The Space
scientist
Shuttle Challenger.
McDonald. It's an
Mhm.
NPR story that you can find. He died recently, and there was a story about him challenging the fact that the Challenger was ready to launch. And he said, no, it's not. The temperature is too low. The launch should be called off. And he was ignored. And the Challenger blew up, and all those lives were lost. So there's a story you can look up if you want to. But yes, I agree to do what we were talking about, ethical decision making.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, you don't get to just make an ethical decision one time in your life. You have to like keep it up. Oh my
Yes.
gosh,
Mhm.
And in our case, back to everyday racism as well as systemic racism, it's like you as a Black woman and me as a white ally, I have to be ready at almost any moment that I go anywhere, or even in my own household, it could happen, where
Mhm.
I have to be ready to speak up honestly. And I'm doing that on some issues, and I feel
Mhm.
prepared to do that on racial issues. I actually haven't been challenged, but then, it's been COVID. I haven't been out a whole lot either. So
Yeah.
who knows?
Mhm.
But yes, to be ready to speak up and say some version of that's not right, or
Right.
sorry, you can't do that while I'm here.
Mhm. And it has, and white people have to recognize it has to be white person to white person, because
I agree.
unfortunately, those of us like me who are the brunt of it, white people don't want to believe this. So you're pulling the race card. So
Right.
it
Right.
has to be from one white person's mouth to another white person's ears
Right.
that was discrimination, that was an injustice, that was racism. That's
Right.
what that was. Mhm.
Right. And even if the person that you confront might disagree or challenge you at the moment, I'm
Mhm.
willing to bet that they will go home and they will never forget that incident. And
True. I
it
would
is
bet that too.
highly likely that it will chink in their armor a little bit. And
Mhm.
I've had that happen on issues of chemical use on lawns and various other things,
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's not easy,
No,
but
but the first place to start is calling it what it is: white supremacy.
white
Not,
supremacy.
yeah, not Stop Asian Hate, not Black Lives Matter, not Antifa, not anything like that. What we need to solve, what white people need to solve, is white supremacy,
Right.
and none of the rest would even be needed or warranted.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
And it's not going to happen all at once, but it's going to
Yeah,
happen with conversations like Bernadette and I are having.
yeah,
And we organize ourselves and we fix our hair and we sit here and we record these so that not
yeah,
all of you have to have these exact conversations.
right.
But if something about our conversation resonates and you can learn something, then who knows, maybe you will have both the courage and the right words when you are confronted with something. And I don't know any other way for change to happen. Prayer and daily actions like
Yes,
this.
that's that.
So if you're a white person and you're watching this, and we know we have people that are white and people that are Black watching, and
Yeah,
hopefully some others, but anyway,
yeah,
I hope you will ponder, if you come face to face not only with the system of racism, which has to be dealt with on a political and corporate and
mhm,
business level, that has to be dealt with there, but also on a daily basis.
mhm.
What would you do? Are you working up your courage? Do you have the words to confront if you need to, if you're faced with it? Because the chances are you're not going to have any warning. It's just going to happen right in
Yeah,
front of you. And then you have
mhm,
to know what you're going to do at that moment. And you have to go
mhm.
home proud of yourself, because like I think it's Alan McDonald and the Challenger, you want to go home saying, I made a good decision today when I spoke out. So anything else on that?
No, that was a good one. We got lots of information and tidbits in on that one. So as Linda and I always say, start talking, keep talking, have conversations on purpose with a purpose, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.